Department of Natural Resources. Really excited to have you all with us this morning. We're so glad you're spending your morning with us to learn a little bit more about the Small Grants for Community Partnering program. My colleague Sydney Mickle is also here with us, and she will be facilitating any questions you all have about the Small Grants program, and she'll be monitoring that chat function. So as you all probably noticed, you're all muted for the time being. There is that chat function, so feel free to use that and to ask questions or get clarification on something that I'm covering this morning. You know, I just appreciate everybody's time, and we'll get through this presentation. It's about a half hour, and then we're going to leave about 20 to 30 minutes open for questions, Q&A. So we will be covering quite a bit of information. So I mean, feel free to use the chat function, but again, we're going to be going through a lot of material, so hopefully there'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So if you can kind of hold your questions till we get through the bulk of the presentation, I would appreciate that. But certainly if there's something that I missed or overlooked, we welcome you to continue to communicate with us that way. Just want to thank you again for joining. I hope it's helpful and informative. This is the first time we're conducting a webinar for this program, and so I welcome all of your feedback. I'll probably be sending out a survey a couple days after this, but would love to get your feedback on if it was helpful and things that we can improve upon in the future. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So real quickly, I'm just going to share the overview of the grant webinar and what we're going to go through. We're going to spend a little time just talking about the program itself and the background, how it came to be. Obviously, talk a lot about the funding opportunity for 2021, the application process and dates, and some tips and resources for you to submit a competitive application. So the Larimer County Small Grants Program is an initiative of the Larimer County Open Lands Program to help preserve open space sales tax dollars throughout the county. And these are for projects related to conservation and enhancement and recreation and education on open space, on public and private lands. And by doing so, we allow groups to leverage these sales tax dollars with seed money for project implementation. And and it's to encourage partnerships and reach more communities. Eligibility. So the small grants application is available to organizations, HOAs, and schools. Government agencies already receiving the Help Preserve Open Space Sales Tax may not apply directly. So this includes Fort Collins, City of Fort Collins, City of Loveland, Town of Estes Park, Town of Berthoud, Wellington, and Timnath. But aside from those entities, everyone else is able to apply to this program. The caveat is that projects must take place in Larimer County. So if your organization is located outside of Larimer County, but the project itself that is being requested is in Larimer County, that is okay, that's acceptable. But that's one of the minimum qualifications, is that it has to reside in Larimer County. This is an important clarification, I think, for everyone attending the webinar, is that this is for special project requests only. So we're not looking to fund general operating requests. We're looking to fund, to give or to support projects that are new. So seed money for new projects, or capacity to an existing program, or, you know, so adding additional capacity or providing money for a new project. So some examples of a new project might be, you know, a new outdoor learning area or an outdoor classroom at a school that hasn't been in before. Or it could be, you know, plantings in a neighborhood that desperately need shade trees in a community, in HOA. Added capacity to existing programs is improving or expanding upon a program, so maybe reaching a new audience or developing new curriculum to for environmental education purposes, things like that. So what we mean by not general, so if, let's say you have an annual event or an annual volunteer event, that's something that, you know, we would prefer you don't apply to this program for, because we'll get to this next slide. But, you know, we have $20,000 in grant funds available, and we want to maximize that money and give it out across Larimer County. So we're really looking for those new projects and projects that add capacity, because we simply can't fund general operating requests on an annual basis. We just don't have the grant funds available to do so. So that's why we're really looking for those two different types of projects. You can request up to $3,000 per project. It's limited to one applicant per organization. Again, that's to maximize the grant funds available and disperse that out across the county. And if you've received small grants funding for 3 years consecutively, then you are required to take a year off from applying. And I don't think there's anybody that fits that case at this point. It's good information to have for the future. Together with the grant application, we really need the buy-in and support of the landowners that are involved in the project that you might be putting together. So projects on public lands, the applicant must be a 501c3 organization or non-governmental entity. Homeowners Association, we will need a copy of your board minutes approving the proposed project. Schools will need a letter from the director of the facilities agreeing to the specific project. And new in 2021, lessees. So if you're an organization that's leasing land to conduct the project, we need a letter from the property owner outlining the terms of the lease and agreeing to the specific project. So that is new for 2021. And what we're really looking for is that owner buy-in. We need to know that the property that the project is taking place on, that the owner is completely fine with the work that's being proposed, and we need that in writing. Before I jump into small grants, the different categories, I want to check in with Sydney, find out if there's any questions we should address before we move forward.
Hi, Jen. There's just one question if the slides will be available to participants, and I said that we are recording this webinar to be posted online.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Sydney. Yes, we will be posting the webinar online. Hopefully, I'm not exactly sure how long it'll take, but within the next week or so, we should have the web link for this video. So, absolutely. So now we're going to talk about the small grants program categories. So the first category is protection and enhancement of natural areas. And this includes, wildlife habitat, river areas, and wetlands. And these categories, your project will need to fit into one of these. I think there's 5 categories. The next one is public linkages with existing open lands and parks. So this includes trails or wildlife habitat. So if you have, an area that is owned by the HOA or by the landowner, and you want to connect a trail to an existing trail, that's what this category is for. Item C is opportunities for environmental education, outdoor recreation, and nature interpretation. So this really encompasses, getting youth outside, conducting environmental education opportunities. This does not have to take place on our open spaces. This can be out in the community, in the areas, that you're servicing. So this can be a wide variety of different projects, and it is a very common category that a lot of our applicants check, because it encompasses kind of a wide breadth of different types of projects. Category D is opportunities for people to connect with the land, and there's 2 subcategories under this category. First is agriculture, and what we mean by that is we're looking for provision of local food production, including community gardens, CSAs, with a preference that these projects are community-minded, connecting a community and its people, are conservation-minded, and have local distribution in Larimer County. The next subcategory after that is increased access to open spaces. And what we mean by that is getting people out onto our Larimer County open spaces. And projects should be nature-based education, nature-based health and wellness, recreation, or transportation to natural areas. So let's say, for example, if you're a school and you don't have the resources to get your class out to one of our open spaces, this increased access to open spaces, that's what it's intended for, is to help pay for the transportation costs associated with that. And the last category is research on our open spaces. And this does require approval prior to submitting an application. But research, what we're looking for is research which will provide new information to increase a better understanding of Larimer County's properties and the visitors who use them. And projects should encourage intellectual curiosity about our natural world and how people connect to it. So there's more information on our website that details this out a little bit more, but research is, a great way to, get out on our open spaces and conduct work. But again, it does require that approval ahead of time. I just want to spend a few minutes talking about what eligible expenditures are and ineligible expenditures. So in general, so project expenditures really need to be, eligible expenses, I should say, should be for anything to implement your project. So materials, supplies, that can even include delivery or shipment of materials, can include the renting of equipment like you see in the picture above. And those are all eligible expenses. If you need to purchase equipment, it does require that you're a 501c3 nonprofit, and you do have to provide a justification as to why you need to purchase tools and equipment. And what we mean by that is, a weed sprayer, or, if you're not just renting, equipment, but you actually want to purchase it, we need to have some level of assurance that equipment will stay with the organization and that it is critical for completion, project completion. And then I just want to spend a quick second talking about delivery costs. So project delivery or shipment cannot exceed 5% of small grant dollars. So if you're asking the small grants program for $3,000, the most you can allocate in that small grants column is $150. So we changed that a few years ago because, you know, obviously getting different materials to the project site is costly. So we did want to include that, but we do have a cap. So just be aware of that as you're putting your budget together. Ineligible expenses, typically salaries and or admin time or design time. That type of expense is not allowed, with the exception of the research projects, because the bulk of the time is staff time. Transportation, in general, we don't pay for time your staff, you know, mileage for staff to get to and from the project or things like that, but we will allow that, of course, for that increased access to open space, and we do allow it for the research projects. So now I want to go through what the project requirements are for a small grant. So first and foremost, the project should align with Larimer County's mission, and it needs to meet at least one grant funding category that we just went through. Also, there's a 50% cash or in-kind match required of the total project cost. So actually that's not true. It's 50% cash or in-kind match of the total project request. My apologies. So if you're asking small grants for $3,000, you need to provide a $1,500 cash or in-kind match. And cash can mean, you know, funds provided by your organization, dues, fundraisers, you know, grants or other funding sources is part of that cash match. And for in-kind, that can be a donation for goods or services, and obviously volunteer hours will also count as that in-kind match. And right now, according to the independent sector, volunteer hour for Colorado is $29.50. So if you have 8 to 10 hours of volunteer time, that adds up pretty quickly to get you to your match. So all of these will qualify. You can mix and match, or you can use all volunteer time, or you can use all grant. As long as you hit that 50% match, you should be fine. And new this year, we are also requiring 2 community letters of support. And what we want is individuals or organizations in your community that will benefit from the project that you're proposing. We don't really want form letters. We're looking for heartfelt letters from the community that are deeply interested and excited about the project that you're proposing. And again, these are required. The 2 letters are required this year. So please keep that in mind as you're planning a submittal later this summer. So the 2021 application, you can see down here, there's a website. That's where everything can be found. Everything that we're going over today can be found on that website. So feel free to familiarize yourself with that. And of course, if there's questions, please let me know. The deadline is September 11th at 5 p.m. It is an online application, and it has been for the last few years. It's been, I think, a great way for applicants not to have to worry about printing off a lot of paper and mailing it in. It is just an online form, and all the content is fillable in the form, and then you upload the attachments via that online application. The online application doesn't save, so it's probably best to start your application in Word and then cut and paste into that online application when you're ready. So these are the components that that are required with the online application. For the next few slides, we'll just be going through the top 3 bullets. We talked already about the property owner consent and the letters of support. Project information is any additional information that you want to include with your application. So for example, if you're planning to do some plantings or seeding, right, you would submit drawings of some sort to let us know, the site location and what types of plants you're proposing, that sort of thing, a design plan, etc. So this is the online form that you will see when you click on the link that's found on that website that I shared with you. And then the top portion really is just the project name, the grant category that best fits your project, the grant amount, and the organization it is applying, and then the payee name. So in this case, it most likely should be an organization. However, some of our research projects, the payee is an individual. Just keep in mind if the payee is an individual, that we are required to submit an IRS form, a 1099 at the end of the year. Continuing on, we're looking for the primary contact person's information. We added this project address if it's different from your organization's address. And that's been the case a few times. So that will just help us understand where exactly the project is located. And we want to know how you learned about this small grants program and if you've received any previous funding. There are a few sections of the grant narrative that I just want to cover with you. So organizational history and background, we're really just looking to get some information about, who you are, get some feel of the background of your organization or school or association. So we want to know who's your community, right? Who's, if you're an HOA, how many members do you have? What's your community size? What does it look like? And what is your annual due that you ask of members? We want really relevant data and metrics to better understand the audience that you're planning that this project will reach. So be specific. The next one is project description. We're just looking for the purpose, the scope, and the objectives of your project and how the project supports the mission of the Open Lands Program. So we'll also ask which grant category your project most closely aligns with and how the project meets that criteria. So again, I think it's really just give us some background, some context about the project that you're proposing and what you're hoping to accomplish by completing that project. The project need, we're looking for specific reasons that this project is needed and why it's needed now as opposed to later. So we want you to take some time and let us know what kind of preparations have you already taken to get where you are now as you're applying. This gives us some context and some background to know that you've really done your homework and due diligence to get to this point. We also want to know if there's public access, right? The project you're proposing, if there's public access, and if you're using volunteers. The budget narrative, it does seem, we do get a lot of applicants who, want to just say refer to the budget worksheet because the budget worksheet is pretty comprehensive. But I think it's important that we understand in this budget narrative why grant funds from the small grants program are needed. And so we're really looking for detailed information about that. Maybe, you know, the more you can explain those specifics, the better. And we're also looking for, you know, explanation, again, if you're requesting tools or equipment, you know, why they're required for the project. So just take some time and really fill that out well. It will serve you well because it's a very important section that needs to be filled out in its entirety. Maintenance, we're looking for who will take care of the project and what was installed after it's implemented. So we want to know about the long-term success of the project. So for example, in the picture, you know, obviously they're planting an evergreen tree. You know, we want to make sure, oh, there's proper irrigation. There's, you know, somebody on site who will be maintaining and checking the trees. And so we need some assurance that those sales tax dollars, these grant funds, are being nurtured and cared for into the future. Evaluation. You know, evaluation can be either qualitative or quantitative. What we're looking for here is what you expect to achieve by completing the project. So describe, you know, perhaps it's the number of plants you installed, or the number of youth that are being served, or miles of trail that are being completed. Just describe those type of evaluation metrics. How are we doing on time here? Ooh. Okay, so we got a few more slides. We're going to go through the budget worksheet, and hoping to wrap up here in about 10 minutes. So that'll give us about 20 minutes for Q&A. So the budget worksheet is a little confusing, and as you can see, this is what the budget worksheet looks like, but I'm going to try and simplify it down and hope this gives everybody kind of a sense of what we're looking for. So in the mid, if you can look at this spreadsheet kind of as two different spreadsheets in one. You have your itemized expenses on the left and funding sources on the right. So itemized expenses, this is your budget. This is just telling us, you know, the project materials, supplies, and delivery costs. What is it going to cost to conduct the project? And the more detailed you can be in this section, the better. That shows us a couple things. One is that you've really thought through the budget and what it's going to take to actually get the project completed. So spend some time and really develop your budget. It will serve you well just in terms of how competitive your application will be. We want to see that your project is shovel ready, that you guys have taken the time to really think through a lot of the details, and that implementation will be fairly straightforward. In this section, you would include labor costs. So this includes any paid or volunteer labor. And again, that volunteer labor is at $29.50 per hour. So if you have a contractor and you need, you know, some of his time or her time and donated volunteer labor, this is where you would fill that out. And transportation costs, again, those are only for categories D and E. But if you do, you know, if you are applying for those categories, then you would fill in your transportation here. Then on the right-hand side with funding sources, you're identifying that funding source here, and whether that's a cash match or in-kind match, or you're asking small grants for that contribution. So then you go ahead and do that again down here. It's cash or in-kind. So for volunteer labor, you would fill that out here, and then that total amount would go under the in-kind column. And again, transportation, you can indicate whether that's cash, in-kind, or a small grant. So here's a sample budget you know, we put together. And I just want to, again, draw your attention to those two sides and pay attention to the total project cost and the funding grant total. So these two should match. And remember, you have to come up with that 50% match. And there's a $3,000 max request. So you want to make sure that these two columns on this side are at least 50% of what you're asking small grants for. And I'm happy to, if you have a budget that you want me to look at prior to your submission, I'm happy to take a look. If you're struggling or you don't understand something about the budget worksheet, I'm more than happy to provide some guidance. So now we're just going to spend a few minutes talking about some tips. What are some things that will make your application really competitive? Well, we're looking for, like I mentioned, shovel-ready projects. And that's really demonstrated by a detailed budget, a detailed scope, and a detailed application. And make sure to include associated plans and drawings that relate to what you're proposing. Partnerships, we're looking for, again, those matching contributions, volunteer opportunities. There's a lot of way, and of course the letters of support, demonstrating, community members who will benefit from your project, and the demonstrated need and impact. So these are really going to set you apart from other applicants if you can really hit those three categories really well. The application review process is a little different this year, of course, with COVID. September is the deadline. We'll do an initial review of applications and I'll screen for eligibility. We will not be conducting site visits this fall because of COVID. If we do have questions about your application, we may set up a phone call just to talk through some of those questions that we have. But for the most part, I really encourage everyone to really spend a lot of time making sure your application is thorough and concise, because we're seeing an increased number in applications over the last couple of years. So being able to fully understand what's being proposed is the best case scenario. And if we do have phone calls, we may reach out, but if you don't hear from us, that's probably a good sign. Recommendations to the Open Lands Advisory Board, that will take place in January, and then we should be able to notify awardees in early February, and then by, probably late February, early March, we'll be finalizing those grant contracts and declarations. And with that, I'm going to just go ahead and wrap up that presentation side of the small grants program. Again, the program website is there on the screen. It has all of the links to the online application and the budget worksheet forms. It also outlines the application instructions. So it's very informative. So again, if you haven't been to the website, please do that and take a look at our materials. And there's my contact information, my email and my office line. Feel free if you have a specific project in mind and want to see if it would be a good fit, I'd be delighted to talk to you and find out more about your project, and we can talk offline about that. But right now, I guess I'd like to just go ahead and open it up for Q&A. So Sydney, do you want to go ahead and let me know what questions folks have?
Yeah, we have about half a dozen right now.
Okay, great.
Liz asked if there is no HOA board meeting between now and application due date, can we do a letterhead approving project from board members instead of copy of minutes?
I think what I would prefer is a draft of the minutes, even if, I think a letter would be fine. I guess what she's asking is it wouldn't, draft minutes wouldn't really work. So yes, I think a letter would suffice. But then as soon as that board meeting does approve the project, then we would need a copy of that as soon as the meeting is done.
Okay. Robin asked, since municipalities are not eligible, can they submit a community letter of support?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We would highly encourage the, you know, community letters of support can come from really anyone. So yes.
Okay. Liz asked, when does the project have to be completed by?
Oh, great question, Liz. So you have a full calendar year to complete the project. So like I mentioned, grants are awarded in March, early March. And so that once that contract is finalized, you have a date from when that contract is finalized. So generally it's towards the end of February. So you have until the next February to complete the project. The dollars need to be spent in that fiscal year. So for 2021, you need to have all expenditures. You know, you need to expend all of the expenses by December 31st of 2021.
Maybe you just answered this, but Robin asked, are you accepting 2020 applications? The earlier slide said it was a September 2021 date. Did not see a 2020 date for deadlines on the slide presentation.
Oh, geez. That's my error. I apologize if it is September 11th, 2020 for the 2021 grant cycle.
Katie asked, for public linkages, are you only interested in those projects that link to county open lands or parks, or do spaces such as city-owned parks, natural spaces, or otherwise?
It doesn't have to be a county open space or a park. It can be a city. The most important thing is that the land that that you were hoping to have that proposed trail on is owned by your association. Because if it's not owned, then you know we can't fund a project where it's not owned.
Okay, James asked, do the community support letters have to be from residents of Larimer County or from people who work there?
That's a great question. I would think that you would, yeah, I think so. I think they need to be in the surrounding, in Larimer County. Yeah.
Okay, and the last one I'm seeing is from Lane. When are approved grants notified?
So that Open Lands Advisory Board meets in the late January every year. And then once they approve the project slated, then the grantees get notified in early February.
Okay, that's the last question I see. Oh, Lane just asked, can this be a part of a larger project?
Lane, are you wondering, is it part of a phased project?
He said, or would this fund a piece of a larger project?
I think as long as the project is a new project or it's adding capacity, as long as it fits in those two, absolutely.
Lane said, I'm applying for multiple grants, XIP and Northern Water, and this would be a part of the entire project.
Great, that's fantastic. Yeah, yeah, we love to see. There's a lot of, you know, there's several grant opportunities in the region, and I would encourage everybody to explore those. So Northern Water has a grant, as well as the City of Fort Collins, Nature in the City. So if you are in Fort Collins, that's another opportunity for you to look at. And Northern Water, I believe it's Waterwise or Demonstration Garden. I can't quite remember the name of that, but they should have information on Northern Water's website.
Wendy asked if the session will be recorded for those who missed it or joined late. She missed the first part.
Sure. Yeah, we're going to be providing a link on the Small Grants for Community Partnering website. We'll provide a link of this webinar in the next week or so. And perhaps we could even, Sydney, we could even send an email out to all the folks who registered and provide that link as well. So you all have that.
Lane said, and salaries are not allowed. However, could engineering of a specific item be covered?
I'd have to think about that and refer back and see if that would qualify. So Lane, perhaps you and I can connect offline, and I can get a better sense of your project and what you're proposing. So my contact info is right there. So just shoot me an email and we can talk offline. Are there any other questions, Sydney?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Well, I know you all have busy schedules, and I just appreciate all of you for participating on the webinar. I hope it was informative and gave you some insights about the application. Again, I will be sending out a very short survey just about this webinar and find out how we can improve in the future. And my apologies for those small typos related to the 50% match and the grant award deadline. Things like that obviously will correct. But again, just want to say thank you. And we really, I'm really excited for this upcoming season, and I'd love to hear what kind of applications you're thinking of putting in. So do feel free to reach out to me. I think it always is beneficial. So if you do have any other questions and want to reach out, please don't hesitate to do so. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and look forward to seeing your awesome 2021 projects come through. Thanks, everyone.